Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Season Ticket Holders. I'm your host, Dane Lillingston, and I have another new and very special guest with me today. He's a colleague of mine, one of the best rugby league minds we have at Fox Sports News. He's an all-round ladies' man and a three-time wooden spoon winner, Mitch Farrugia. Welcome to the show, mate.
Oh, thank you. What an introduction, hey?
I put a lot of time and effort into these introductions, mate, and it's one of the best yet, so I hope you're grateful.
Oh, I am.
How's everything going, mate? Busy day today?
Yeah, busy one in at work this morning after the Tigers' diabolical Easter Monday game. So copped plenty from Cody K and the crew.
It must be a very tough time to be in the office as a Tigers fan at the moment, mate. And we're going to dive right into it because Lachlan Galvin has been named this weekend. We just saw the team list. But before we get into it, I just want to get you to talk to us, the audience, just a little about who you are, what got you into rugby league, and why do you love the West's Tigers?
So yeah, I've been with Fox Sports for about 4 years now, and just love sport. Growing up, played a whole heap of sports, soccer, tag, touch footy, you name it. I pretty much had a go at it. And yeah, just loved rugby league. My parents were big fans of the Tigers, so just sort of tagged along. And my first kind of memories of footy were back in 2005 when I was about 5 or 6 years old. So it was a good time to be a Tigers fan back then. The Benji flick pass, Robbie Farah running around, and the old crew that they had there. So yeah, I was hooked since then, and it's been a bit lean, obviously, the last 13 years, but yeah, I still just love the game and doing the job that we do. It's a great spot to be able to watch everything and being across it, and yeah, it's unreal.
God, talk about picking a right time, mate. You chose the only good year to be a Tigers fan. So, and hey, congratulations to you for starting in '05 and still being a fan today, mate. That's a real fan if I've ever seen one. All right. Now, look, mate, the big news we're going to talk about, and it's dominated the rugby league all week, has been Lachlan Galvin. Now, we're going to try and find a way to put this succinctly and give a little bit of a brief to everyone the story. But firstly, just quickly off the bat, he has been named this weekend. As a fan, are you pretty shocked considering he only just got dropped last week?
I am. I did think this was a going to be more of a long-term move. Maybe for a month he sort of would have been in reserve grade. But I mean, all the stuff that's seeming to keep coming out now about this bullying and going to the RLPA and legal sort of statements. I don't know if it's the Tigers sort of trying to pull him back into first grade to say, well, he is playing, he is with the group, or if it's more so off the back of losing to the Eels in a disappointing game after such a big week. So. I mean, they talk the talk in the presser. The players, the two captains jumping up, Luai and Coruscant, both said that if he earns his respect back, they'll welcome him back into the team. And Marshall said that he's got to do the same thing, and he's managed to do it all within a week.
I mean, we know he played New South Wales Cup on the weekend. He had a security entail, a guy following around. He didn't do any media. I know the team, the Magpies, were instructed not to talk to any of the media. By the reports that I saw, he had a pretty solid game. But if you had to guess, do you think this is more, like you mentioned, a panic move from Benji Marshall to bring him back in only after a week? Or was that just always going to be like a bit of a week-long punishment, see how the team reacts to this news, and then put him back in?
Yeah, I kind of think it's more to do with the off-field type of stuff rather than the on-field performance. The Magpies team in Cup have only won the one game, so obviously it's a different quality side for Galvin to really shine in, and you can only sort of do what you've got to do with what you have around you. So it wasn't the best game from him, but he wasn't the worst player on the park. But I don't think he warranted to be selected on form if that's what Benji was trying to pick off. And yeah, I just think all this extra noise, it's potentially a way to try and shut it up and just say like, look, he's back in the team and there's no claims of this bullying and he's not ostracized and everything else. Like if he's in the team, well, he must be a part of it.
Yeah, and it was a pretty explosive press conference. I want to break down, but just on the latest stuff because there is so much to unpack. But we saw in the press conference after that Easter Monday game, obviously they couldn't get the job done, did go down, put up a fight against the Eels. But in that post-match press conference, it was pretty interesting because one of the journalists did ask about the Lachlan Galvin situation to Appy Coruscant, how it is all working. Shane Richardson, the CEO from off camera, jumps in and basically sort of tries to shut the question down. The journalist bites back a bit. They get through it. But even Benji Marshall and Appy, they looked a little bit surprised that he jumped in. And then, of course, the follow-up question to Benji was, has he been ostracized throughout the week? I mean, are you just happy with how the club's sort of handling that whole situation? Because obviously we're journalists. We know that they have to be asked those questions, but it feels like the club doesn't really know how to handle these situations right.
Yeah, they've had a real history of it to the Tigers. I know it's new management, and I do think that they are moving in the right direction with Shane Richardson as the CEO now. But it's very weird. Like I can't really remember too many press conferences where a CEO would be sitting in the room after a post match game and telling the coach and player not to answer a certain question or trying to shut down a
During the
journalist.
question as well, like during the
Exactly.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like butting in. I honestly can't remember that happening. At least since working in the media and cutting up that sort of stuff for work. But yeah, it's really weird, and I think obviously they're trying to be very protective of Benji and the group and Lockie because it is a delicate situation if you're talking about the RLPA and bullying and the way he's being treated. But it just doesn't seem like the right move to be sitting in a presser. I mean, you know the questions are coming and they can play a straight bat. I don't think they needed Shane Richardson to be there to sort of tell them no, don't answer it.
It was cringy. It was
Yeah.
a cringy sort of situation when you got Benji Marshall, who used to have his own show on Fox. He's done tons of media, one of the superstars of the game. Anyway, let's just try and I want to try and put this into a bit of a timeline because this is going to get pretty crazy. So strap yourself in, Mitch. I know you've gone through it all before, but just for our listeners and watchers out there, I mean, it came out last Monday, right? The Tigers put out the statement that he wouldn't be there beyond 2026 to he's currently contracted on. That basically led into him being dropped the very next day. He wasn't selected by Benji Marshall for that Easter Monday game that we just touched on. Following that, his teammates Jerome Luai and Sunia Taruva, they posted some cryptic, you'd have to say, Instagram messages. Basically, it felt like taking shots at him. Of course, there's more to break down there too, but that's what it felt like publicly. They were taking an aim at their teammate, basically saying, "Show me the money." Obviously, he played in reserve grade, which we just talked in, had a solid game, had a security escort that went out there. And I suppose the biggest and most explosive part was the reports over the weekend came out that a legal letter had been sent to the club from his management, from his team, that basically alleged there was some forms of bullying going on. I'll get more on you on that. But basically, that is sort of the week that's been. The legal contract stuff, I think, is the most interesting. Obviously, he's 19-year-old, 5'8", came into the club last year, really should have been the NRL Rookie of the Year. Ineligible for that, right? In the end, because of
Yeah, with the suspension hip drop.
but by all reports, he was the rookie of the year, right? Like he came in, he was the shining light for you guys last season. He's come in, started the season really hot. The Tigers were obviously in the eight, looking really good. Formed a nice combination there with Jerome Luai. This bullying thing comes out, and he's rejected this $6 million extension offer. His agency management group raised the matter with the security. Sydney Morning Herald reported there were two other players with the RLPA also thinking that maybe there was some other sort of bullying or not happy with the way the club was being treated. The West Tigers literally just on Tuesday afternoon came out and denied reports that any other players were involved in this situation. That's a lot to take in. I think I've tried to succinct that into a week. Is that basically what's happened these past 7 days?
I think you've done pretty well to get that all wrapped up. Yeah, it sounds about pretty much everything, and it's quite chaotic when you put it like that.
It is, right? And I mean, it's this type of thing that we've actually gone through this already. We thought in the NRL, and we've all talked about trade windows and what needs to happen there. But Dylan Brown, obviously, he was the first one that kicked all this off, signing that $13 million contract to go to the Newcastle Knights. There was no real kick up a stink from any of the Parramatta players or anything. They're obviously going to be privately disappointed. He's gone there. The next big bombshell, Daly Cherry Evans, the captain, the Queensland captain, Sea Eagles, ends up deciding that he's not going to be there at the end of the year. The club, that obviously was a week long sort of turmoil, bit of a blow up there as well. They've sort of seemed to have moved on from that. Now we've got Lachlan Galvin, who absolutely takes the cake out of these situations and this contract situation, right? And just on based on what we've seen so far, and like we just touched on a little bit, but the way the club's handling this, saying these statements, you'd have to sort of think that this could have been handled a very different way. If they didn't put out that statement last Monday, which really blew this whole thing up, saying that he wouldn't be here beyond 2026. Obviously, there's negotiation tactics. We'll probably get into Isaac Moses, his player manager. But was that the thing that sort of kicked off? And was there a different way to handle this whole situation?
I think both parties definitely could have done a lot better. Particularly the revelations that came out where it was said that his management basically told the Tigers like don't even bother filing a deal, like we're not looking at it. I don't think that's in the best interest, and obviously the Tigers have to do future planning themselves. They can't just sit on their hands and wait till November 1 if Galvin wanted to explore the market and then decide, oh no, we need to chase another half or we need to re-sign players or do what they need to do. So I do understand the club coming out and being on the front foot and putting a line in the sand basically to say that hey, he's knocked back the deal and he won't be here. But it's just really tough. I mean, you got to think of the situation. Like he's a 19-year-old kid. He's played 27 games, and I think it's poor probably on his management's behalf to, I mean, make him susceptible to all this criticism. And there's so many different things flying around. At first, it was that he wanted more money, and then it came out about Benji's coaching style, and he didn't see himself developing. And then now there's been these claims of bullying and the playing group being off him. So it's a lot for obviously Galvin to deal with away from footy, and it seems like he was able to do that and just go out and play for the cup team on the weekend, and it didn't really bother him too much. But you'd have to think away from the cameras and away from the media. It'd be a really tough time for him and his family. So you do get where he's coming from, but also, I mean, the club was sort of put in a really vulnerable position. And if you look back at the Tigers, they've been done in a number of times by players or player managers, particularly with Isaac Moses. And the big one is obviously the big four, where it was Aaron Woods, Mitchell Moses, and James Tedesco.
The glory
Um,
is.
yeah, exactly right. And Luke Brooks, all being under the same management, all off contract at the same time. And I think at the time they did not handle that really well, putting a bit of like pressure on Tedesco to sign or to move on. Obviously, he went to the Roosters. Mitchell Moses then was released early to join Parramatta, and Aaron Woods obviously leaving to take unders to go to the Bulldogs. So they definitely have had their issues with Moses in the past, and I know a few other clubs have said that they won't deal with him. We know Nick Politis and the Roosters don't deal with him after what happened with Joseph Suoli'i. So I think it's been bad on both parts, both the club and his management and the player. But it is a bit confusing on what's going to happen now, because he had, as we mentioned, he's been named again. So
Crazy.
does that mean he just comes out and plays, and everyone gets over it, and the team are fine with him saying that basically Benji can't coach, or he doesn't think he's the coach for him? Is that just all brushed aside? Like it's sort of like the Tigers half made a statement, but then they brought him back. It's typical Tigers fashion, very messy.
I was going to say, mate, you must be absolutely used to the roller coaster by now, right? I mean, this is not a new story. I mean, it is a crazy story, but these sort of situations do seem to happen to the Tigers.
Yeah, they do, and I mean, this is sort of the first one that's really popped up under Shane Richardson. I do think the club were going in the right direction, and obviously, something's working when you're signing players like Jerome Luai and those premiership caliber type players to want to
And lots
buy
of
in.
momentum this year. That's what I was going to say. Lots of momentum this year, which is what makes this whole story even the more sadder, right?
Exactly. Well, they started probably the best they have for the last 5 years, 3-3. And two of those games that they lost were by 2 points.
They
They
were
were
always in
touched
it.
up. They were touched up by the Broncos, but even in that game, they looked pretty good and they showed good signs. It was just the class of Reynolds.
Good game
Um,
there, mate. I just want to rub that one in a little bit. That
I
Reynolds
thought
chip and chase all time.
I thought you would. I thought you would. And we made sure. I think the Fox cameras made sure that everyone saw that chip and chase about 100 times. But
Oh, that's slow-mo video. I posted it on the season ticket
I'll
holders. I've favorited that. For anyone who hasn't seen it, please go and watch that beautiful moment.
give it to you. I'll give it to you. That was good. That was a good try. But even in that game, they were in it. It was just that they were blown off the park by the experience of the Broncos there before and after halftime. But yeah, lots of positive signs on the field, and it seemed like they were pretty quiet. They were sort of out of the media for a lot of it, and then out of nowhere, bang, they've
Boom.
exploded. And I mean, the team had the perfect opportunity to come out and quash it and perform yesterday on Easter Monday, but they didn't do it. It was, yeah, really disappointing performance, and I think like obviously watching the Tigers over so many years, I just had this gut feeling going to the game that they weren't going to show up, and it was going to be too much, and it proved to be. It obviously proved to take a toll. I think a lot of the players played their worst games of the season, and they couldn't get the job done in what really could have been a real big statement win and a big turning point for the club.
Yeah, and we always, I mean, as media, as journalists, we see it all the time. But no matter how many times you ask a player and they come out during the week and said, no, we don't read the headlines, we're not on Instagram, we don't pay attention to this and that, it obviously has an effect. Because, like you just said, you watch them closely on Monday, it does have an effect. When you have all this outside noise, that's what happens. Now, you touched on a bunch of things there, and that's why it's so hard to break this story down. But I do want to touch on Isaac Moses because he is obviously you don't, I guess as a fan, you don't always think about player managers too much. But this year, more than any other year that I can remember in history of the NRL, they've really come into play. And it's the negotiation tactics that obviously there's two sides to it. You want to think of the player getting them the most, protecting their family, setting their family up long term. I think that was a big part with Dylan Brown as well. But there's this dark side to it as well, which is these negotiation tactics, which you as a fan has now have your heart ripped out because one of your best up and coming players, the player that you could sort of rest your hat on, thought you could build a club around, is now on the way out in the most messy way possible. Now, I pulled up some numbers before. I think 8 players contracted to Moses have quit the Tigers since 2017. So that is pretty crazy. And there was a little rumor as well going around that Jareem Buller is also his player, right?
Yes, yeah, he is same management.
I know. So it's not a nice feeling. And the story there is that there is a rift with Benji. Is that right?
I believe so. Through all the reports, it seems like he and Benji don't get on, or Moses and his management, I guess, don't feel that Benji is the coach that can take the club forward. And obviously, he's got a few clients spread across the NRL, but a couple of key ones, obviously, at the Tigers, their fullback, Jeremy Buller, as you mentioned, and Lachlan Galvin. So, two of the spine players at the Tigers, if the management doesn't think that Benji can coach, is obviously going to start to agitate obviously the players for a release, and it's exactly what's happened with Galvin. And I mean, I think Buller is locked in for an extra season to Galvin. So I don't think we'll see that anytime soon. And I do feel like it's a bit different circumstances with him to Galvin, as a personal player, because there was rumors coming out last year that Galvin wanted out after 4 or 5 NRL games. So
Yeah.
obviously there was something going on before it had even started. So yeah, I think it is a very different situation, but yeah, it just has been the case with Moses and the Tigers, and like I sort of touched on before, there are clubs that just refuse to deal with him.
Which is
The
crazy.
Roosters,
And
I
that's
know,
not really
right?
how it should be. That's not how it should work at all.
Yeah, and then you've got other clubs. I know Manly. I think he has a lot of clients. Obviously, Seabold, their head coach is one of them, and a lot of players that he manages are at Manly. So it does happen. It's not just Moses, but there are obviously managers, big high profile managers that do sort of have a lot of players and a lot of sway at certain clubs. And I mean, if they're not happy, they're going to pull their players out of those clubs. And I think that's exactly what's happening with the Tigers.
And I don't know what the solution is. I think I heard Buzz Rothfield say that the NRL is really seriously looking into it because when it's getting to this stage where they are agitating, you said that word, and that's the word that we love to use in NRL media because that's what these player managers do. They agitate for releases. They do things like the bullying legal letters and having this sort of things that say that Benji can't coach, which isn't right. And I don't agree with that at all. And I think that the NRL does have to look into these things. Interesting thing that I have to say on this is I remember being at the Tigers season launch with the corporates. I think it would have been back in maybe February this year. We're out there at Concord. All the sponsors were there. We spoke to Galvin. He fronted the media, did an all in with all the journos there. I was there. And we did ask him, where is the contract situation now? Obviously, you mentioned he did ask for one as early as 5 games after last year when he was already exploding, really burst onto the scene. But I just remember getting a feeling that day. He said something along the lines of, I don't know, my management's taking care of it. On the face value, it seemed like a very just sort of like straight bat, trying to get rid of the answer. But I just got a real deep feeling that day that he just didn't want to be there. And there was something about his answer that I just didn't feel like he was committed to the Tigers. It was a gut feeling that I had, and I was not surprised in the slightest to see all this come out. Of course, you'd think maybe things will change or whatever, but it feels like for whatever reason, he just hasn't wanted to be at the club. And it's something that's built up to this point, even though he's long term. And he seems to be performing under Benji, right? Like, I don't understand. It seems like he was taking his game to another level. Like, they said that this wasn't the right environment for him as far as the coaching wise, but would you argue that he looked like he was showing signs of development in the early games of this season?
Yeah, and well, Benji actually made that sort of point. He said that under his coaching, whether he likes it or not, he's played for the Prime Minister's team at the end of the season for the Kangaroos. He would have been the Rookie of the Year. He's had all these extra accolades coming through, and he's established himself as a first grader. And I don't think, obviously, the Tigers were in a situation coming off 2 spoons last season, so they did run the risk and play Galvin because he earned his spot in the preseason. But I just don't think he would have played. I don't think he would have played an NRL game at any other club really, unless there was significant injuries or a certain toll, where a certain player had left and they needed to fill a spot. I just don't think that he would have been fast tracked like this into the NRL world. So it is really weird that he would sort of want to leave from the get go with the Tigers, and even if you think back, he's obviously signed this deal a year or two ago, if he didn't see a future at the Tigers, I'm not sure why he signed a 3-year deal that's locked him in until the end of 26. Before he'd even played a game, obviously you want that security. But if the Tigers weren't going to be the club, I'm not sure why you'd sort of take that and then try and get out as quick as you can, sort of thing. So it's there's so many layers to this as we keep mentioning, and so many different stories. I mean, for such a young kid to be this agitated, and like you said, that grab where he said he's not sure and his management's sorting it, that wasn't the first time he'd said that either. He'd
That's
been
right.
saying
Yeah.
that since last year, and even earlier in the year when Jerome Luai had been there and things like that. And I mean, it's hard to tell exactly what the reason is going to be, and I don't think until we figure out where Galvin is going to land, not going to figure out the real reason why he wanted a release. Because there's even been talks that he was offside by the club bringing in Jerome Luai, who's won 4 premierships, is a excellent half. He's done it on the Origin level, he's done it on international level, and you'd think a young 19-year-old half would be over the moon that the club are finally bringing in an experienced playmaker
Premiership
that he
winner
can
4 times.
four-time premiership winner that's proven himself that he can learn a thing or two off. And by all reports as well, it seems like Luai has taken a back seat to some extent and been that game manager and done a lot of the kicking and allowed Galvin to get his hands on the ball. Um, when we know that his biggest strengths are obviously coming in off that left side and stepping in and creating opportunities with his footwork. So there's so much to unpack in this, but yeah, it does seem really strange that he would want to release after signing that deal. But yeah, I don't think we're going to find out the real reason until we figure out which club he lands at. I think if he goes to a Penrith or a Bulldogs, you can 100% say it was a coaching reason, because the Bulldogs are obviously flying under Serraldo. There's been so many players that they've picked up that have improved out of sight. And you look at what Toby Sexton's doing. He's a young playmaker, and his game has improved tenfold since being at the Bulldogs under Serraldo. Or if you go to obviously Ivan Cleary, the amount of players that they've had through their system that they've been able to bring through. With his coaching philosophy, you can start to see obviously Blaise Talangi's had a bit of a rough start with injuries and in and out of the team, but he showed great signs on the weekend, and I think that partnership with Cleary is going to keep growing, and he'll keep growing as a player. So if he goes to a club like that, I can totally understand why he'd want to leave, and obviously the player has a choice at the end of the day where they want to go. But if he does end up going to a Parramatta, it's a very similar situation to the Tigers. They've got a rookie coach in there. They've got an experienced playmaker in Mitchell Moses, who would be very similar to Jerome Luai, who's obviously got that experience on the Origin and international level. I think it's a very similar club, so the move kind of wouldn't make sense for those reasons as much. But obviously, it's going to all come out eventually. But yeah, it's a bit hard to know what the real truth behind it is and how much the management might be in Galvin's ear, or what the actual situation he's being told, sort of thing.
Yeah, no, that's right, man. And he was a Parramatta fan growing up too, much
He
to the
was,
heartbreak of you guys.
and he was a Parramatta junior as well. But
That's right.
if I could be wrong, but I believe they let him go because they thought he was too small and wasn't going to make it. So
Yeah, yeah,
Tigers ended up picking him up.
that's crazy. Yeah, because Campbelltown product he is. I think he played like
Yeah,
early juniors, right, for Tigers, and then Eels system gets dropped. And by all reports, it looks like the Eels are going to be the front runner for his signature. I saw Jason Riles' comments after the game with the NRL 360, and he basically said,
I
"We're
saw
in."
that.
So, yeah, that's going to be very interesting to see. What I do want to touch on, you touched on Jerome Luai and that combination, which I found interesting because I did hear about how Luai may have addressed the team and basically said that he was willing to take a backward step this year, which you'd have to think did probably happen. But then, of course, the reports were that potentially him and Coruscant, Luai and Coruscant, shunned him during the week, didn't really want to talk to him. Of course, that was asked of Benji Marshall in the post-match presser. He basically said he didn't notice anything, but of course, that's what Benji's gonna say. That leads into the bullying claims. We saw Luai post that. I don't know exactly what it was, man. You're a bit younger than me. What was it, like some anime sort of turn my back or whatever it was? I
Yeah,
didn't.
I'm not
Yeah,
too big into the to that anime sort of stuff, but it was just the main message of that team first, and obviously,
and he's
Jerome is a very team guy, and coming from Penrith, you have to be, and you look at the success they've had; it's all been off the back of being a team.
Yeah, and then the other one was Taruva, which I did hear that that story was supposed to be for close friends only. So that
Yeah.
makes it a slightly different thing. But of course, if you're going to post it to any story, whether it's your close friends or not, you know that that's going to get leaked by someone. I did love his one though, because Here Comes the Money was Shane McMahon's theme music. Shout out to WWF back in the days, the Attitude Era. Here comes the money. Oh, I love that shit, man. That was one of my favorite theme songs coming up. Shane O'Mac, shout out. But obviously that leads into a serious side, but that was the bullying. We saw those posts. It felt like bullying from the outside in. Maybe not bullying, but it felt like he was singled out in a way. There's the rumors that obviously the players didn't talk to him throughout the week. What's your sort of grab? You've gone out to Tigers. I've been out to Tigers. We talk to Benji regularly. We listen to Benji regularly. We talk to the players. Luai seems to have really grown into a leader. I think Coruscant has been a great leader for them the last few years. They're obviously going to be a little bit hurt, but it's also a business, the NRL. I spoke to Parramatta players during the week after this had all broke and about Dylan Brown, how they treated him once he decided he would be going to Newcastle for the money, you'd have to imagine. The Cherry Evans situation, he's the club captain, been around. Obviously, Galvin's a little bit different. He's a young gun coming in. The club's sort of on the up. They've been through so much heartbreak and disappointment that it does hurt a little bit more, I guess. But what's your grasp on the feeling with the club, and is there bullying going on with Lachlan Galvin?
That's the first thing I was going to say is I don't think his situation is quite as quite like Dylan Brown. I mean, obviously Brown is actually off contract and can negotiate and talk to clubs, so that's the main difference there with him. And obviously, I mean, he's had a deal in front of him, and that's why the para players have reacted the way they are. And also he's a lot more senior. I know. It sounds funny to say because he's so young, but Galvin is only 19. I think we've got to remember that as well. I find it a very different situation. But yeah, being at the Tigers issue, and looking at the training standards and everything, it's all lifted, and it's off the back of those guys that you mentioned. Luai and Coruscant have been the main two at training, and you can see the standards that they're driving, and it does seem to be on the up. And before all this came out, I wouldn't have thought that there was any sort of bullying or anything like that. I think Luai's post was okay. I think he was sticking up for his coach, and if you listen to his press conference from last week, that's the exact message he had. He said that he didn't begrudge a player or Galvin in that situation for wanting a better opportunity, because he chose to come to the Tigers because he wanted to be the main man and for that opportunity, as well as to get the money that the Tigers were willing to offer him at the time. So he went through all that last year, even though it was a different circumstance. I think it was more so what put the players offside is the way it's all gone about. And as we mentioned before, it's a bit on the club, it's a bit on the management, but I think the comments about Benji Marshall, when a lot of those players have signed to be under Benji, whether it's for his coaching or what he did as a player or what they can see him adding to their game or giving them an opportunity, I think that's what put the group offside. And it echoed through his comments that through Luai's comments, I should say that it's a team first mentality, and they are trying to fix the culture. Obviously, there's been something really wrong at the club. They haven't made finals for 13 years. That's not normal, particularly in a code where there's a salary cap, which is meant to keep things pretty even. So obviously there's been a big culture issue, and it finally feels like it is actually starting to shift. So the rumors and the things that are coming out about bullying do really seem surprising. I do think Two Rivers post did cross the line. Obviously, it was intended for close friends, but like we said, these days it's nothing's a secret, you know.
Nothing's a
So
secret, mate. If you're posting on any form of social media, that's on you because you have to know, unless you're an idiot, that that's going to get out.
exactly, and even little things like there was a Tigers fan page, and a few of the players liked the post saying going off at Galvin for wanting to leave. He's a junior and yada yada, and a few of the players liked it. Like people are going to see it these days. Like there's no secrecy with that sort of stuff. So I
There's no
think
hiding.
Taruva definitely should have thought twice before posting that, even though it probably wasn't. I don't know how you class it. It definitely is some sort of like bullying or singling him out, but I don't think it's to maybe the extent that these legal claims are going. And obviously, it's really hard to tell from the outside looking in because we don't know the full context yet of what those legal claims are going to be, and if those other players that have come out did say something in those reports, or now the club are saying that those players didn't say that. So it's still very wishy washy, and it's really really hard to decipher that sort of stuff. At the same time, you would kind of think that his management are just going to do whatever they can to get him out of the club, and If that's showing an Instagram post as a form of bullying, that may be the route that they try to go down.
Which it totally can be in this day and age. I would hate to be in high school or primary school going through the social media age because you can't escape bullying. And on that too, we did mention it before, but the Tigers literally released a statement Tuesday afternoon that said that reports in the Sydney Morning Herald naming two other West Tigers players were incorrect. The story's simply not true. It's another thing where it's a little bit surprising. I don't know if every club would react this way, but the Tigers obviously feel like they need to get on the front foot. We'll talk about where we think he's going to go, but just as far as this, I'm going to ask you some quick questions. Does Lachlan Galvin play for the Tigers in 2026?
No, I think he'll be gone. And I think hope you'd hope from a fan's perspective, the way they deal with it is I'm not sure if they're allowed to do this, but tell his management that he's allowed to start looking. Obviously, he wants to go, and I don't think he's going to backflip on that. So I think the best case scenario would be for the Tigers is to tell him to start looking, figure out where he's going to
Oh, I'm
go.
I'm sure he's looking.
Oh,
I'm
I'm
sure
sure he
Isaac's
is
looking.
too. Even though he's not meant to be looking as we know the rules are, but I'm sure he's already looking. But I think if the Tigers can get a bit of clarity and maybe both sides swallow their pride a little bit, they let Galvin look, they find out where he's going to go, and then the Tigers can actually use. He's still got a year and a half on his contract. If they can get a young player up and coming, or they definitely need second rowers and they definitely need some more outside backs. The top 17, I think, is a really strong squad, really strong team, but the actual top 30 squad is really weak. And we've noticed that through a few injuries already, and they seem to really drop off the pace, particularly in the outside backs. So if they can try and get Galvin to figure out where he's going and then potentially get a like for like swap or a swap in a position we need, that's probably the best case scenario.
Does he see out this season for the Tigers?
I think so. I think this year he will. You got to remember he's not on a big contract.
How much
So
is he on to? I found this very surprising because this sort of slipped under the cracks, but how much is he on at the moment?
I think I've heard from 150 to 300, that sort of range.
Which
Nothing
it,
more than 300.
which it seems crazy based on this story that he's worth $1 million plus, but he is in the second season when he's only played 20 odd games, like you said, what, 21 or something it was in his debut year. Would have been rookie of the year, but that doesn't mean you instantly become $1 million player. We all know what happens with $1 million players in the NRL, especially spine players. This is an incredible amount of pressure they're about to put on him. I mean, is he even worth $1 million?
I don't think so at the moment. I don't think so. But obviously, that deal was the Tigers also upgrading the 2 years he had left, plus adding on to it. So I feel like obviously they wanted him to know that the club was going to be built around him. So they wanted to make him an attractive offer. And I think that all in all, they were trying to get him to avoid to hit the open market. So that's why I think the deal was big. Did have some red flags though. It's almost like a case of deja vu with Luke Brooks, sort of paying on potential.
Tigers
Although
legend.
although Brooks had actually had a bit more service in him, and at the time between him and Moses, they weren't working, and it was clear that one of them needed to be the main playmaker. So I do understand why the Tigers did offer Brooks that sort of money. It didn't work out with him, and that's the risk they were willing to again take with Galvin. I don't think at the moment he's worth $1 million. I would say maybe in that 700 to 800 range, but
Which would seem
then
fair. That
again.
would seem fair.
You'd think so for his age, but then again, I mean, Dylan Brown's going to be on 1.3 next year, and halves are just this commodity that all the clubs can't seem to get their hands on. So maybe $1 million wouldn't have been terrible if you're keeping a local junior and you're sort of building the club around him.
That's true. I mean, Dylan Brown has been to a grand final. But yeah, you're right. I mean, do you invest in the future? Tigers are a club that we all know has to play overs to get players. But they brought in Luai on how much? When's Luai 1.2?
One
Is
point one, 1.2, I think.
1.1.2 for a four-time premiership winner. That means that Galvin really 700 would seem like still not a fair comparison, but I mean, a fair comparison would be 700,000. It seems like he will likely get more than that when he goes to the open market. Now, we all probably thought that Bulldogs might be one because I wanted to touch on some Gus Gould comments that he has said before. But one of them was Lachlan Galvin could well be one of the best teenage footballers I've ever witnessed. Lachlan Galvin will earn more money out of rugby league than any other player in history, and whoever's got Lachlan Galvin in their team will be close to winning premierships. After saying all that in history, he's also come out and said the Bulldogs aren't interested. What do you think Gus is doing there?
Well, I was actually out at Bulldogs today, and Cameron Serrato was up for media, and he was asked a number of questions on Lachlan Galvin, and He didn't quite close the door as much as you would have thought. I mean, Gus had obviously come out and said that they weren't chasing him, and Serrata sort of played a bit of a straight bat to that. But he also did say that when a player like that comes on the market, you have to have a look and you
Of
have to be
course.
interested. So, I mean, I don't know if it's a tactic again. I mean, they came out and said that Daly Cherry Evans wasn't going to be there at the Bulldogs next year, but I mean, they still haven't pulled the trigger on signing Toby Sexton. So I think while ever he's unsigned, they're still in the market.
No, no, no. I totally agree with that. And I think Gould's always playing a bit of mind games. You never know what's going on in Gus's mind.
Exactly.
100%. Looking into this weekend, mate, obviously he is going to partner Jerome Luai. You got the Sharks Sunday afternoon. Good old Leichhardt. You go into the game?
Yeah, I'll be there. I'll be on the hill. Hopefully, they can turn things around from the Easter Monday game, which was a bit of an embarrassing showing. But yeah, they did actually knock off the Sharks last year at Leichhardt, and they were the underdogs in that clash. So you never know what's going to happen, but it's going to be so interesting seeing these two in the halves. And I don't think Galvin's going to get a very warm welcome to Leichhardt.
Eighth wonder of the world. You guys going to boo him?
I don't think I will personally, but I think a lot of the fan base might.
You reckon he's going to get booed? Like
I think
majority?
so. I think so. I think it'll be pretty overwhelming, and yeah, I think a lot of fans aren't happy that he's back in the team. I think they wanted the club to sort of make a stance because they have been rolled over a number of years by players or managers or whatever the situation's been. So I think a lot of fans aren't happy that he's back in the squad so quickly.
It is interesting, man. Like just from the outside looking in, not following obviously as closely as you as a fan, but obviously for work. Benji Marshall is, how can I put this delicately? He can be very stern with the media. That's a good way to put it. And he has actually, though, in all honesty, like he can come across as well, quite cranky, even though he's been in the media, dealing with him throughout the preseason and coming in with three wooden spoons. I think he had to sort of play his cards a little bit close to the chest with the media. Didn't want to get too much. But the way he has handled this situation, taking away that he's brought him back after 1 week, which I find that situation a little bit weird, but I find he has handled this situation pretty well. And I feel like you as fans, right? You back what Benji's done. Being a club legend, this is the biggest test of his young career. And he obviously had the runs on the board, at least the way the team was performing. So I found it very interesting. But I do have to scratch my head at him coming back after just a week out. Whether that's some sort of panic move, I don't know. Maybe it was just to test the waters, to get it out there. I am going to be very interested to see how he runs out on Sunday. I suppose looking ahead then, with the team you've got, showed plenty of potential. We talked about Buller at fullback. You've got pretty nice outside backs with Taruva. Dewey's back there this week after playing in the halves last week. Terrell May, just about the form prop, taking over from Payne Haas. Geez, New South Wales are going to have a really scary looking front row. I'm not looking forward to that this year. Affy, as we talked about, and who doesn't love Alex Twa? Love his stuff on Fletch and Hindy, absolute legend. And Talon De Silva coming off the bench at hooker. So you guys have got a nice sort of rounded team. You've even got the experience of Jack Bird and Royce Hunt coming off the bench. You think this is a team that, are you confident that you guys can make the eight this year? Is that what you're hoping as a fan?
I think if you had asked me that question maybe a week and a half ago before all this sort of stuff came out, I would have been honestly thinking that they can do it. That this could be the year that they really push for it. But in saying that, the starting 17, the strongest team they can put on paper is a very good side. But one or two injuries, like Skelton is out, and then you bring Brent Naden in, who didn't have the best game against the Eels and is obviously coming off injury. And then after him, you're sort of really testing the waters with young guys like Luke Lalali'i, who also played on the wing. He's been dropped for this week, so Dewey can accommodate and go back into the centres. So there's not a lot of depth there. I think that's the next thing that they need to build, and I think it might take them a year. Um, it's sort of obviously the easy one to compare would be to the Bulldogs, how their first year under Serrato, they showed some positive signs with obviously Crichton there and the culture started to change. But it wasn't until that second year when they signed another 4 or 5 players and the likes of Kurt Mann and I think Salmon came across to the club then and a few of their forwards sort of were more bolstered and their pack looked a bit stronger. I think that's when they're going to make that final jump to really contest for the eight. I don't think they'll be a spoon sort of side, but I think they'll sit outside the eight, maybe around like 13th to 10th ish.
So you heard it here first. You're not doing four in a row.
No, no, hopefully no 4 in a row. We don't want to be the anti Penrith and pick up 4 straight spoons. So yeah,
uh,
hopefully that's not the case.
it's still another record.
It would be not one that they're chasing though. Or you
Um,
hope they're not.
Mate, look, honestly, I would like the Tigers to do well, and I could just think, just from the fans' point of view, I know just when the Broncos won the Wooden Spoon, how much it hurts to win three in a row. I couldn't imagine, and to see the way they started the season as a fan, that's who I really feel for in these situations because just when you've got all this momentum, just when you think everything's finally going well, this happens and just rips the guts out of everything you were trying to do. So in that regard, I can understand the dropping. I can understand all that type of stuff with the player managers and all that. And I hope that he is getting the right advice. Like we did mention earlier in the potty, like he's 19 years old, man. And did you have to sort of think
Yeah.
about the advice that he's getting told? Like, he's obviously performing in the field, he's doing well, but he would have so many voices in his head now about $1 million contracts and where he can go and Benji Marshall this and where he can go after this. So I do hope that he can just pull it in. I hope it doesn't derail the season, mate, because it is really nice to see the Tigers do well. I obviously live in the inner west, so I'm in Tigers territory, man.
Tiger
Um,
Town.
I'm deep in Tiger Town. Bring on Madge, baby. And my old housemate Pat, shout out to Pat. He was a big Tigers fan, so I went through all the heartbreak of him the last few years watching Tigers games on the couch and him crying. But look, no, I do really hope that they do well. So look, we'll just have to wait and see. You'd hope, right, that this doesn't derail the season. There's plenty of positive signs there, and Benji Marshall seems to have learned a lot in his first year.
I think so, and I think to Benji's credit as well, we go back to his press conference last week. He did not say a wrong word about Galvin, as a player and as a person, and he stuck up for him. He said that everyone needs to take a chill and they need to cut out the stuff that's going on and all these different rumors and just let the kid play footy, whether that be in the first grade side or in the cup team. And I am surprised that they brought him back so early. I do think that their hand might have been forced a little bit, considering how weak the left edge was against Parramatta, with Nathan and Luke Lalali'i, and then obviously having to switch Dewey into the halves, so you lose that sort of. Dewey's been really good defensively at centre this year, so it is a big switch up to make, and I think their hand was forced. Latu Fainu, the other young half they have on their books, isn't ready just yet. He's still coming back from broken hand, a broken finger, so it would have been interesting if he was fit. I think he's still a week or two away. Um, but yeah, I feel like I don't think they would have won with Galvin. I mean, on the weekend against the Eels, I think that they were off. It's the worst game that they played this season. I don't think it was a halves issue, necessarily. I think it was more so the major reshuffle on that left edge, and also just the week that was. It was a really tolling week for them, and obviously it didn't. It showed on the field that they weren't up for the game.
It's going to be interesting, man. Sunday afternoon, Leichhardt. You couldn't script it any better. It's going to be an absolute cracker. I can't wait to see it. Watch out for Mitch in the stands. He's going to be booing Lachlan Galvin, he says. No, he's not. Awesome, mate. Mitch, thank you very much, man. I think we've broken down the Tigers pretty well. There's obviously a lot to unpack. We could probably do a 2 hour episode just talking about this Galvin stuff, mate, because every single day, even this afternoon, like we said, things just keep coming out. So until he signs with the club, which my guess at the moment would probably be Parramatta, but until he signs with the club, I guess we're not going to go see an end to this in sight. And it's going to be interesting to see when Benji Marshall finally snaps at the media pack and says, leave me alone, because he's going to cop a lot of questions until there's a solution there. Mate, thanks very much, Mitch. You've done a great job here and on Fox Sports News. Mate, where can we catch you? Your staff producing, reporting. I know you're getting more into that. And Tinder, Hinge, where can we find you, mate?
Nah, no dating apps for me. No dating apps for me. Yeah, hopefully on Fox Sports News, obviously, as you mentioned, trying to get more into the reporting sort of stuff, do a lot of the packages on the weekend. But yeah, hopefully out on the road a little bit more and maybe at those Benji press conferences asking the hard questions.
I can't wait to see it, mate. Look out for him on the hill at Leichhardt, sliding in the mud Sunday afternoon against the Sharks. Mitch Farrugia, thank you very much for joining us, mate.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks very much for listening, guys, to season ticket holders. We'll catch you soon. Take care.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Legend, bro.